welcome to Chromatic Counsel Podcast, the podcast where law, leadership, and color collide. I'm your host, Kerry Heaps, and I have a great show lined up for you today. And today, my guest is Shirley Diaz. She is the managing attorney and founder of Diaz Vidales, a boutique law firm serving clients in estate planning, business law, nonprofit formation, business litigation, and white collar defense. Based in Washington, D.C., Shirley has built a reputation for combining sophisticated legal counsel with a practical, client centered approach. She is also a former president of the Hispanic Bar Association of Washington, D.C., has served on the board of governors of the Hispanic National Bar Association, and is known for her commitment to mentorship, leadership, and expanding access to legal services. Before becoming an attorney, Shirley worked in finance, economics, and experiences that continue to influence the strategy or strategic counsel she provides to entrepreneurs, families, and organizations today. Shirley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kerry, for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to have you here. Just doing some research on everything that you've been doing and how you balance running a law firm and your family, your growing family, actually.
Yes.
So I'm excited to dive in here. But I would love for you to just talk a little bit more and tell our listening audience, because you have an impressive background, again, spanning that economic, finance, law, leadership. What originally drew you into the legal profession? And how did those early years kind of shape the attorney that you are today?
Sure. Well, I mean, I was definitely one of those kids who always had some argument. So I was always told as a kid, like, you're going to make a great lawyer. So I think that's like the first kind of seed. But of course, it it kind of grew from there. And once I went to college, I did political science because I knew a lot of lawyers studied political science. But then, like you mentioned, I went off and did economics instead. So
Mhm.
after undergrad, I didn't go straight to law school. I went into Goldman Sachs to do finance. And while I was there, because it's such a heavily regulated industry, we were constantly being informed by in-house counsel of changes in the regulatory landscape, and we really learned the legal side of the financial regulation side of the business.
Mhm.
And that's where it clicked. I was like, okay, so I'm very interested in this regulatory side. So I said, I think I still do want to be a lawyer, but stay in finance. So I was at Goldman Sachs for 2 years, and then I left to go to law school. And while in law school, I interned at the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I summered at a big law firm doing SEC investigation defense, and I ultimately joined that law firm straight out of law school, and was there for almost 7 years before starting my own firm, basically doing exclusively SEC investigation defense, sort of like white collar as well.
Mhm. And I think also too, I hear so many different attorneys that come on the show, and they have different backgrounds and different reasons of why they decided to come into law. So I always like to ask that question. And yeah, and I think you're right. In finance, there is just as much compliance and, laws that you have to follow. I think it probably equals the amount that you do within being an attorney. So you left the traditional law firm path to launch your own firm, and this is always exciting to me. What has surprised you most about entrepreneurship?
Well, it shouldn't have been surprising, but it really is up to you how much or how little you want to work, and that's directly related to how much or how little revenue you make. And
Mhm.
so it's very different from a paycheck because, essentially, especially in big law, like no matter how many hours you bill or how few hours you bill, you're always going to get the same paycheck. Now, of course, if you're not doing any work, eventually someone's going to notice and they're going to politely ask you to leave.
Mhm.
But you could theoretically uh, go with those ebbs and flows, and your income stays the same. But I have found with having my own firm, like I can absolutely feel the impact of, did I post on LinkedIn this month
Mhm.
as much? Was I out at networking events as much? And if I don't do all of those uh, sort of marketing, if I don't do that marketing activity, there's absolutely a relationship with how much business I'm getting, in the months following that. And so sometimes, like you mentioned, my growing family, I mean, I've been pregnant basically since I started the firm. I'm 8 months pregnant now.
Oh.
My firm is 11 months old. So the first few months I had lots of energy and I was, out and about. And then as soon as I got pregnant, if anyone's ever been pregnant, you know how that there's just like a tiredness that hits. Um, and so it's really difficult to kind of keep that energy up to go to events, do the lunches, do the networking, be consistent on posting.
Mhm.
But if you don't do that, then where are your clients going to come from? you know, people
Exactly.
people don't know
Mhm.
uh, where you are, who you are, unless you're staying top of mind and being consistent with marketing. And so it's almost like you have two jobs. Like you have to do service to clients that you do bring in, but then you have to keep up with your marketing and sort of your networking so that you still have a pipeline of clients coming through once you're done with each case.
And congratulations on your, you're pregnant now. Congratulations on the law
Thank
firm
you.
too, because like you said, it's still kind of in that infancy stage, sort of 11 months, but very impressive. You know, there's so many attorneys too that listen to the show that are with a big law firm or a mid-sized firm, and they're like, "Gosh, I'd love to have my own firm. I'd love to go out, on my own." They're probably hesitant to take the leap for different reasons, but what advice would you offer to attorneys who are considering this? Like, what is your main thing that you would say to them?
Definitely have 1 year of savings somewhere, and not like 1 year of your current lifestyle, because of course if you're at a big law firm you're making a lot of money and you have opportunity to travel and buy designer things and luxury. No, like I mean like 1 year of your basic living expenses. That way you can give yourself time in a new firm to get to the point where you have enough, a steady enough stream of clients. Um, it took me about 8 or 9 months of my firm before the revenue from the firm, what I could pay myself from the revenue was enough to cover my own personal expenses in full. It
Mhm.
was like every month the firm would cover a little bit more of my expenses, and it wasn't until month eight, I think month eight, I had a $500 shortfall that I had to dip into my savings. So I consider that basically there. And by month nine, my firm revenue was able to cover my personal expenses as well as business expenses. Um, and this I say to big law people because most people in big law, assuming they're not partners and they're associates, they don't have their own clients. They service like the firm clients and partner clients. Mid-size and smaller firm attorneys probably do have their own book of business. So like if they left and started their own firm,
Mhm.
there's a chance that they're leaving with cases already. So they kind of already have revenue from day one. But even then, it probably won't be the same amount of revenue as what their paycheck is. So even for a mid-size firm associate or small firm associate, they might still, have an consider what that runway might look like. Because it's one thing to sign a client and have them pay a retainer, but you can't pay yourself until you've done the work. So there's always going to be a lag
Mhm.
from client acquisition to when you see that paycheck in your account. So I would say, make sure you have the money saved.
Yeah. And then what about the marketing aspect? Because I think too, like you brought up a good point. Like if people are working, if an attorney's at a big law firm or even a mid-sized firm, they might not have to go out and do any kind of brand building or marketing. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I think maybe that's part of the job description too, but for most of them, they probably don't have to do that. So if you're going out on your own, like you said, you have to be posting, you have to build your pipeline. So do you feel like, just kind of coming up with a marketing plan should also be something they need to consider, or outsourcing it, or what advice would you offer them there?
You bring up a great point. It's never too early to start the business development side, whether you're in a firm that you want to leave in a couple of years, or even if you don't know what you're doing exactly, but even if
Mhm.
you're a first year associate, I would say, join the bar associations, make sure you're making those connections, keeping up your connections with your law school classmates, with the associates that you're working with, because that's definitely going to be the base, the foundation of your referral network if you ever do go out on your
Mhm.
own. And I would say, what you mentioned is whether people are actually doing that now at these big firms. And my experience was I was absolutely involved in bar associations, and I was absolutely building my network, but I never had the responsibility or the need to do the final sale, like to do that final pitch. So
Mhm.
you're just kind of like meeting people and kind of just, you know, making connections for the sake of it, but
Mhm.
you never really expect business out of it. Especially, when I was a junior associate, I did not expect that. If I met someone who was in-house at a company, I never expected that they were gonna reach out to me and say, "Hey, Shirley, we got this SEC subpoena. Can you handle it?" Like, I knew that I wasn't going to be that person. If they wanted
Mhm.
to hire the firm, they would probably reach out to a partner anyway. So I think it's a different approach, but it's a lot easier if you've been building that network the moment you started law school, even like just being involved in the legal profession, that when you do go out on your own, and now you do have to be a little bit more intentional
Mhm.
about, hey, just so you know, if anyone ever asks you about, estate planning, or if you get anyone, who's in an issue, and your firm can't cover it because you're conflicted out, or you've priced the client out, please consider me for any of those referrals. Like, once you have to make that final pitch, you'll already have that network of people that you know, and it's already been genuinely established, so it doesn't feel like you're forcing the relationship for the referral.
And you brought up about bar association, because you've been involved in several different bar associations, and I would imagine too for people who want to go out on their own that's probably a crucial thing that they need to do is get involved, not just with your state bar if it's mandatory, but the voluntary bars as well.
Yes, I joined the voluntary bars as soon as I became a lawyer. I mean, even in law school, I was somewhat active, but definitely once I started working full time as a lawyer, I joined the bar associations. And by join, I mean, like, I wasn't just like a dues paying member. Like, I showed up to several events, like at least one
Mhm.
a month, if not more. I ran for the board, and then like worked my way up the board to the point that I became president, as you mentioned. And now I'm like on national board. I'm still on
Mhm.
the board of the DC Bars Board of Governors as well. Um, and all of that is great for network building, because I would say most of my referrals come from other lawyers, simply because how many times have you told someone who's not a lawyer that you are a lawyer, and they suddenly give you all this legal issues that they're having in an
Mhm.
area of law that you do not practice, you do not know anything about, because most people just think, oh, a lawyer, they can give me some information. And so
Mhm.
I rely on those conversations happening at a grocery store or somewhere, and then that lawyer thinking, oh, you know what, that's not something that I do, but I actually know someone who might be able to do this. And so most of my referrals come that way.
Mhm.
um, and so really, in and some lawyers look for clients directly, and we've seen kind of like ads and things that are directed at an actual potential client,
Mhm.
sort of more of the traditional like billboards and things like that. um, that's not something that I've done yet. Mostly I've been focused on creating those relationships with other lawyers in the community, so that whenever they have a friend or a family member, or someone that they just interact with in their life, come to them and ask if say, hey, I know you're a lawyer, can you do my estate plan? And they say, oh, that's not something that I do, but I'll refer you over to Shirley. So that's been my strategy.
Awesome, awesome. And we're going to continue our conversation on bar associations right after this message.
Before you ever say a word in court, the case has already begun. Attorneys know it well. The moment you're seen, your presence sets the stage. That's why Bodies Don't Lie, Trial Presence and Jury Intelligence System was created. It's more than training. It's a courtroom performance and human behavior system, crafted for attorneys who want more than routine. You'll learn 3 skills that traditional legal education never covers. First, discover how the colors you wear quietly shift your credibility before you speak. Second, unlock how to read jurors beyond questionnaires and standard voir dire answers, looking for cues where others miss them. Third, master the art of spotting unconscious body language tells. revealing which jurors are truly persuadable in trial, depositions, and cross-examination. This isn't just theory, it's applied strategy for every pivotal moment in the courtroom. If you're ready to command your presence and sharpen your reading of everyone else, explore Bodies Don't Lie through Chromatic Counsel. Now, let's return to the conversation.
Welcome back to the show, and I am talking with Shirley Diaz, and we have been talking about bar associations. And I wanted to ask you too, Shirley, do you think younger attorneys, even if they're at a bigger firm, should they get involved in those voluntary bar associations early on in their career, or should they kind of wait, like get a little bit more established, or do you think it matters?
I would say the sooner you can get involved, the better, especially if you're in big law, and even if you plan on staying in big law. We've talked a lot about sort of the considerations if you're going to go out on your own, but like, let's also talk about people who do want to stay and who want to make partner. At some point, you will have to have a book of business, whether that's before you're even allowed to make partner, or maybe your firm has sort of like a junior partner, non-equity partner step where you're allowed to go up that step without any business, but you can't take the next step until you do. So at some point you will be responsible for bringing in clients.
Mhm.
And I would imagine it makes sense to me that someone who's going to hire you wants to have had that relationship with you over time. If someone's in-house and they're deciding between two firms and they know someone from one of the firms and they've known that person for years, all things being equal, they're probably going to go with the person that they've had that relationship for years. So I would say, even if you're planning on staying at the firm you're at, you need that time. And so
Mhm.
you want to start as early as possible on your business development journey, because as a first year, you're probably not going to bring in any business, but by year 10, you should be able to bring in some kind of business. And so
Mhm.
you're going to need sort of those 10 years, which just seems like a long time. I mean, that was my game plan when I started as a first year getting involved in the bar associations. And I'm already an eighth year now, and I feel like it flew by.
Mhm.
So, um, and the great thing too is like you're going to meet people who are associates just like you, or recent grads just like you, and people take jobs all over the place. So you might know someone as a peer, they're at another firm maybe, and then they decide to go in house, and now you're keeping an eye on them because now they're a potential client.
Mhm.
um if we're thinking about big law. So it's it's imperative, whether you're staying at a firm or going to go on your own at some point. Everyone needs to learn that skill, and it's a unique skill to learn to market yourself.
Absolutely. And I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about like the client side for your firm because you work with a lot of business owners. And what are some of the biggest legal mistakes that you see people make when they go out on their own?
Sure. So we're talking about non-legal entrepreneurs that I work with as clients.
Mhm.
And I definitely see a huge overuse of AI these days, where they say, well, I can do all of this myself now. And I think to an extent that's true. I mean, anyone can incorporate an LLC, on the state's Secretary of State website. You don't need a lawyer to do that. And then they just stop there.
Yeah.
So, for example, like I have a client recently who came in and said they never trademarked anything, and lo and behold, someone else has trademarked their business name,
Oh no.
and now they're in a position where they don't own the trademark to their own business's name, and they have invested a lot of money, and they have brick and mortar locations, and somebody else you know went
Mhm.
under them, someone who they know, which is the sad
Oh
part,
my gosh.
and who
Wow.
did this on purpose, it seems. And so now we're having to go to the patent office, to the trademark office, and see what we can do about that. So there are so many things that if you have a lawyer, we sort of have checklists of things that we understand. You want to have good articles of incorporation, you want to have good internal policies, you want to make sure things are trademarked, you want to make sure that you're owning everything you're going to be using.
Mhm.
And I don't think um people understand the value of that, and they don't want to spend the money up front because it is expensive. And imagine someone starting their own company with their life savings or they have a loan, they every penny is precious, and
Hmm.
they see legal as like kind of like an expense and like a loss. And it's not. you know
Yeah.
the lawyer is there to make sure that everything you are building and investing in is protected so that you don't end up in that situation where someone has trademarked your name from under you, or in another situation I see a lot of business partners who don't have formal um, partnership agreements, for example, and then years down the line they have an argument, an issue, and now we're trying to figure out how are we going to sell the shares, split the company, and they don't have anything written out in advance because they did not use a lawyer to set up the company. They just incorporated it themselves and
Hmm.
then literally used AI to
Hmm.
generate agreements. And the agreements do not cover, a situation like this
Yeah.
because they're AI generated, right? And so having to untangle those messes, it's going to cost you just as much, or if not more, especially if you end up having to litigate, as if you had just hired the attorney in the beginning
Yeah.
and made sure that, all the I's were dotted, T's are crossed, and everything makes sense. And we plan for that worst case scenario. Like, what
Hmm.
happens if the members have a dispute, the partnership falls apart? Like, what do we do in that case? And we plan it all when everyone's happy and in a good mood,
Hmm.
so that we don't run into that. So I would say that's the biggest issue, is trying to cut corners at the beginning by do it yourself with AI or LegalZoom, um, which, assuming everything goes well, then those are fine. But the
Hmm.
moment one thing falls apart, then you're going to be having to spend the money on legal anyway.
Yeah. And I can just attest to that too, because I think being in business for any length of time, it's going to come up. No matter how good of a business owner you are, how right you try to do things, it won't matter. It's going to happen at some point. And yeah, people think like, oh, hiring an attorney is expensive. Wait till you get served papers or you have to do litigation or then because it's just if you don't have those things, you're right. You're super stressed out, it's expensive, and all of those different things. And I'm sure you see it too for like, because you do estate planning too, correct? Yeah. And I mean, how many people don't want to do a will? They don't want to, or they avoid it. And I don't know if that's because
Right.
the human element in us, we feel like, oh, we're never going to pass away, or I don't want to deal with this right now. But it's something, it's an uncomfortable conversation, but you have to have it. You have to have something in writing, especially if you have children, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and I will say the majority of my estate planning clients, if not all of them, are new parents. So they're all either expecting their first child or have children under two,
Hmm.
and they've realized, well, we need to have something in place. So thankfully, those estate plans are kind of like more happier because we kind of assume, like, all things being considered, this probably will not be the estate plan in place when you guys actually pass away. You guys will be, much older, but this is sort of just like a just in case
Hmm.
situation. Um, so we're not in a situation where it's kind of like end of life planning, where really the adult children are leading the ship, and the
Hmm.
person whose estate plan it is kind of, being asked by their adult children to do this.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that most of my clients are new parents, because that way they don't have to, they're not pressuring a different person to put the plan together.
Hmm.
So that's been good. I've been lucky in that sense that that my clients have been the kind of people who recognize the importance of it. Most of my clients are lawyers as well, so that's another reason why I network with a lot of lawyers, because most of my estate planning clients are actually lawyers. Not
Hmm.
all, but that tends to be the majority. Um, and and then I also, see the probate side, um, where people in that scenario mainly are families where the person who passed did not have any kind of estate plan in place. And so we're having to kind of figure out what to do
Hmm.
without any instructions from the deceased.
Yeah. And those have got to always be really tough to deal with. Yeah. So obviously the show's called Chromatic Counsel, and I love to ask all of my guests a question about color or wardrobe. So I wanted to ask you because, when you're meeting with clients or maybe you have a court appearance, do you intentionally use certain colors, or are there certain colors you gravitate towards when you're going to court or when you're just at the office meeting new clients? Do you have kind of like a go-to color?
I do definitely black when I'm going to court,
Hmm.
and that's just to be as conservative as possible. It's
Hmm.
just to, for my wardrobe to not be what the judge is focused on. And
Yeah.
also because I think clients sort of have a vision in their head of what a lawyer looks like. And so I think if I show up to court in anything other than black or maybe like a gray or a navy blue, then
Hmm.
they're kind of like, oh, she doesn't look like how I expected. And that's just my own assumption. Maybe clients are more open-minded than that, but I want to make sure that I look how they would expect a lawyer to look for them.
Hmm.
Um, but when it's just, meeting in my office, things like that, my firm logo is purple. I'm like a big purple kind of lavender person, so
Yeah.
I try to stick to those colors. But ultimately, my goal is really just to make sure that I'm presenting well, so that that part of building trust is established, and they're not like, oh, okay, is this a serious attorney? Who is this
Hmm.
person? Like, I don't want that to cross my client's mind ever. I want them to make sure they know that I'm serious about my work,
Hmm.
and that I'm going to take their case seriously.
And I love that you brought up your logo color because purple is a loyalty color, that people feel loyal to, so it's always a great color, I think, for branding. And like I said, just you've done some amazing growth too. And like I said, I just love that you have the purple in the logo. And it's one of my favorite colors as well. I love purple. And of course I love like the turquoise blue that I've got in my logo. So looking ahead, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because right now I'm kind of about to take my maternity leave, so I'm about to kind of like go on pause with everything.
Hmm.
So right now I'm excited about welcoming, a new baby to the family.
Yeah.
Um, but once I'm recovered from that, and I don't plan on having any more children. Obviously, like that's not necessarily always in your control, um, but my plan is once I'm recovered postpartum and I get my energy back,
Yeah.
um, to really kind of like crank up as much as I can in terms of my advertising and getting out there, and just seeing how I can grow my firm. Right now I'm a solo practitioner, um, and I would love to grow through partners. So I see that coming in the next couple of years is to add partners, to add practice areas through partners. And I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds exciting. And last question here, because you've accomplished so much already, but if you could go back in time and go visit yourself on that first day of law school and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that be?
Ooh, um, gosh, there's so many things that I would say to myself as a first year, as a 1L.
Well, if it's
Um,
more than one, that's
but
fine.
I mean, I definitely got a lot of great advice, which was good. Like I did get a lot of good advice about, everyone around you is going to be your peer in the legal profession forever. And I thought,
Mhm.
okay, that's interesting. And I did take that, advice to heart. Um, I would probably say just being a little bit smarter about money. Like I was in big law for so many years and I didn't buy a house. That's my one biggest regret. I didn't buy a house. And it's
Mhm.
really hard to get approved for home loans as a business owner. Like they need 2 years of your business record. So I'm like, okay, one more year,
Mhm.
let's go. Now that I have two kids, like gosh, do I need a house,
Yeah.
So I wish I had bought a house when I was getting a paycheck. Now that's not law school related because that's just anybody.
Mhm.
So maybe as a law student I would tell myself um just to try out as many things as you can. Especially
Mhm.
now as a solo, gosh, there's so many cases that people call me about. outside of what I advertise. I think people just, oh, there's a lawyer, I'm going to call. And sometimes I'll take the cases, and I'm glad that I did public defense work when I was a 1L summer. I'm glad that I did pro bono at the firm, doing appellate cases, because all of that stuff has come up. And thanks to the fact that I've at least had some exposure before, I feel
Mm-hmm.
comfortable taking cases in new areas. So yeah, if you're a law student, you never know where your career is going to take you. So try as many things as you can, just to build out your skill set.
Awesome. That is great advice. I love that. And Shirley, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. It has just been an absolute pleasure. I hope you can come back on in the future too, when, maybe a year or two down the line, we'll see where you're at and what you're working on. So I
I would
hope you'll
love
be
that.
able to come back. Yeah, absolutely. And if you'd like to get in touch with Shirley, we have links in the show notes below, so you can go directly to the website and contact her directly. And again, Shirley, thank you so much for your time today and for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And that is a wrap for this episode of Chromatic Counsel. If you like what you heard, I hope you will click the like button, click subscribe so you know when we drop our next episode of Chromatic Counsel. And as always, I am wishing you continued success.